Hello, welcome. Welcome. We're going to get started here in just a moment. Hello and welcome. We're going to get started here in just a moment. It's going to be a nice intimate group tonight. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, we're going to give an overview of where we are in the facilities planning process. The chat is open throughout, so you can feel free to engage with us there. And if there are any questions, you can feel free to come on screen or off mute and ask us that way as well, if that's a preferred communications method. As always, we record this meeting and they will live online, and they often get good viewership after the fact as well. So I think we are good to get started here. Mike, if you'd like to bring up the screen. And as Mike is doing that, my name is Michael Aiken. I work for a company called Link Strategic Partners. We're a community engagement firm, and our whole job is to make sure that stakeholder feedback is used throughout this facilities planning process. We've had the real pleasure of working with the college and the surrounding communities for the last couple of years, and it's been a really great relationship. For myself and my colleague Poppy Humphreys, who you'll meet momentarily, will be making sure that any questions that folks have are addressed and that any feedback we get continues to be used through this process. Katie, it is not, I don't believe, a hybrid meeting any longer. It's a fully virtual meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So let us get started here. Next slide, please. So I'm going to bring in Christina Schramm from Montgomery College to set the stage a little bit. What's going on at MC? Christina.
Sure. Hi, my name is Christina Schramm, and I'm the Director of Capital Planning, Design, and Engineering. And tonight we're going to go over the facilities master plan that is proposed for the Rockville campus. First of all, this slide gives you just an overview of Montgomery College by the numbers. First of all, we have about 39,000 students, and currently our summer classes have been doing very well with enrollment, and they're up about 10% compared with this time last year. So, you know, we're really optimistic that our enrollment's going to start, you know, increasing after the pandemic. You can go to the next slide, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. And so we're going to do some quick introductions. We'll give you an overview to the planning process and the status of where we are currently. And then the rest of the meeting is discussion and questions or any feedback that folks have. And if you're watching this meeting after the fact, which often happens, feel free to send us your questions through email, and we'll show you how to do that. And we'll make sure we address them as we go forward in the process. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about us. I mentioned my name is Michael Aiken, joined by another Mike here, Mike Glaros, who's going to take over the rest of the presentation. They're the lead consultants on the facility plan. So Mike, I'm going to bring you in to introduce yourself and take it from here.
All right. Thank you so much. So as Michael mentioned, my name is Mike Glaros, and I'm the principal in charge for Canon Design. We've been hired to help out with this master plan, and we are a 100-year-old firm that has been doing education projects since we were founded back in Niagara Falls, actually, in the Buffalo area back in 100 years ago. You know, we pride ourselves on being connected to our clients and being engaged with the communities in which they sit, and for being an innovative firm that brings a lot of experience and insight to the work that we do. So the first question maybe is, what is a facilities master plan? And a facilities master plan is a process that every state institution goes through every 10 years. It's required by the state in order to understand the overall framework for capital projects required to support the mission and academic vision of the institution. It is intended to address key issues that are required to support enrollment, to identify space needs, and to plan for any new initiatives that have a facilities impact. Along with all of that, it does need to address the relationship between the college and the adjoining business and residential communities. So really engaging with the stakeholders. When it's ultimately done, the facilities master plan will include a summary of the existing conditions of all the buildings on all the campuses. It will summarize all of the projected needs that are kind of identified from, the new from enrollment projections, as well as from new initiatives that are undertaken. It will include an overview of the institution as a whole and reference many of the documents that the college creates in terms of establishing its goals and aspirations. And then it will include an implementation strategy, which allows for a general understanding of what sequence projects need to go in order to move people and things around the campuses. So there is already a plan in place. This is something that happens every 10 years. So what does the current plan show? Well, for each of the campuses, the plan showed a relatively aggressive construction program. Many of the buildings were identified as in poor condition and or small inefficient footprints for their uses. So back 10 years ago, it was identified that a number of buildings would need to be constructed, some demolished. And you can see here on the plans, buildings that were intended to be constructed in yellow, renovated in orange, and more or less left as they are in blue. So for the Rockville campus, that included renovations of Macklin Tower, as well as the physical education building, and new construction around a new parking garage, as well as for the performing arts, the student center, and the humanities. So there were a number of projects on the Rockville campus at that time. So we're in the middle of this process, and you might be wondering what the schedule is. We started off this spring with what we call the discover phase. During that phase, we reach out to different constituency groups. We read a lot of reports. We conduct surveys. We do everything we can to gather information from anybody who may have it about the current status of the campus, future plans, anything that will impact the plan. So starting this spring, we kind of went through that process, and then towards the end of spring, at the end of the semester, we began to actually synthesize all of that information into a series of themes and concepts that are the foundation for the plan, which is kind of where we are now, and that's what we'll show you in just a moment. From here, over the summer, we'll begin to test those concepts and dig into the details of the plan and look into some of those sequencing issues that I mentioned previously, in order to deliver a final master plan document in the fall to be submitted to the Board of Trustees of the college, and then once approved, ultimately to the state of Maryland in early winter of next year. So we have been doing a series of community engagement sessions over the last month plus. We started with a college-wide kickoff. It was a virtual setting, having everybody kind of engaged. And then we had a couple of focus meetings at the Tacoma Park and Silver Spring campus. And now we're coming back to the Rockville campus to meet again. Then we'll go to Germantown and then the East County area, where there's a plan for some future presence. And then once we get through the summer and that sort of detail phase, we'll come back and do another college-wide presentation to show you where we are, just before we begin to polish things off and submit it to the Board of Trustees. So what have we heard in all of this time? Well, we broke up our engagement into three categories. The first is faculty and staff, and then we had students, and then community. So when we met with the faculty and staff, we had a number of different means of kind of communicating with them. We had focus group sessions, we had a survey, we did some mapping exercises, and some of the key things that kind of came up out of that we'll walk you through. So one of the first things we did was just ask everyone to describe Montgomery College as a whole from their own perspective, and then also what did they think the students would say about it. So on the left-hand side, you see what we got feedback from in terms of their perspective, and then what they thought the students would think on the right-hand side. So from their perspective, they see the institution as very diverse. They see it as delivering a quality education. It's a group that's really focused on excellence. So there was a lot of interest in sort of pushing forward the boundaries of the institution and always serving the students. It is a very student-centered college. Many of the respondents had comments to the effect that they're really focused on student success. They're there to help support them, and they are focused on trying to drive results for them as well as the institution. They also noted that it is a transitioning and changing institution, as all higher education institutions are, influenced by both technology and the changes that occurred during the pandemic, as well as the ever-evolving economy and population of the county. They did acknowledge that it is a complicated and bureaucratic place where there are many things you need to navigate as a student. So they were kind of focused on that. One of the key themes that kind of percolated to the top was one of innovation. People were really eager and interested in pushing the college forward and being engaged with the cutting edge in higher education. So when we turned it over and asked them what they thought the students would say, their number one comment was really about the complicated and bureaucratic process it takes to navigate the institution. So that's something we kind of took to heart. They also acknowledged that students would recognize that it is a supportive environment where people are there to kind of help them through the process, even though it is complicated. They felt that students would acknowledge a lot of opportunity that comes from being engaged at the college and a lot of choices that they have that help support their goals and aspirations as students. They believe it to be a friendly and welcoming place that is open and accessible for all community members. And they believe the students would talk about the quality education that they are afforded by the institution and the academic excellence that supports that. So some other exercises we did with faculty and staff, we did a mapping exercise and had conversations around a number of topics on campuses. And one of them was to kind of go through three categories. What is the heart of campus? You know, that place where you can kind of feel the pulse of the student body, where they're going to gather and there's going to be some energy around it. And then the antithesis of that, what are the dusty corners, the cobwebs of the campus where maybe people don't spend a lot of time and there could be a higher and better use. And then what are the kind of front doors of campus? Where do people arrive and what is their first impression? So you can see here a little diagram of the map that shows, you know, there are some significant pieces of the campus that are considered to be a little underutilized. They include the physical education and athletics components, as well as some of those smaller buildings that maybe have less active functions at the moment. When it came to the front door of campus, people sort of identified two. One coming off the parking lots on the south near the science building, and the other by the student center. Interestingly, there are differences and similarities when you align the student conversations with the faculty conversations, and that's one that aligned pretty well. Another thing that we did was we asked them to describe the Rockville campus in a single word. And the first one that kind of popped to the surface was hub. It really is kind of a central location in the county, and it is the largest campus. So a lot of the faculty felt like it was the epicenter of activity and things kind of worked through it. They also acknowledge that the campus is quite tight and crowded. The buildings are pretty close together. There's not a lot of room on campus, although that's been alleviated a little bit through the demolition of the old student service building. And they felt that the campus was a little disjointed, that things aren't well connected together, and that creates a sense of silos between some of the academic groups that work on campus. And they also acknowledge that it is a bustling and busy place. One of the funny comments that came up was the comment that the campus is half-baked. And what they meant by that is there's sort of some glamorous new buildings that are busy and alive with activity, the science facilities, the new student center, those sorts of places. But then there are other places that are in need of that kind of update and maintenance. And so there's sort of a dichotomy between those two halves of the campus. So we did a similar exercise with the students. We went to all the campuses and we met with students in 2 locations on each campus. And we had a series of physical actual boards in the campus for students to come up and engage with, add stickers to, and put their comments on. And we asked them some of the same questions about the front door of campus, where the heart of activity is, and where they would take a selfie. What's their backdrop for a selfie on campus? And there were a couple of interesting things. One, some of the student responses did vary from what the faculty talked about, but some were similar. So that idea that a lot of people come to campus through the parking lots on the south and the bus stop on the south side of the campus, or from the parking lots on the north and the student center up there, kind of held true. While the heart of campus was a little bit harder to find. Students kind of found their place. A lot of people talked about the new outdoor space that has been created on campus. Some students, particularly those who are in the sciences, really felt that the Science Center was the heart of campus. While the students that we talked to that were in the student center really saw that as their home base. So depending on where the boards were placed and the students you were talking to, you may have gotten some different responses, which was kind of interesting. When it came to that idea about a selfie, there was a lot of people who were interested in taking that shot from around the pond or in the science building, especially around the dinosaur, but also a lot of people who really started to think about that central green space on campus as that location for them to kind of engage with it. So another thing that we did on campus or in these boards was to ask them about spaces that they thought they would like to have more of on campus. And we kind of broke it down into 3 categories. These were the 6 images that they had to choose from. And you can see in green, there were a lot of responses that kind of fell on those 2 categories. And then in the bottom 2 corners, there are 2 more categories that got about 50 responses. And then the last 2 got about 30 responses. So that top tier was cafe spaces, food service, more options, better healthy options. And then recreational and fitness space. There certainly students who are on campuses that have very limited access to these kinds of spaces were seeking more, but it was pretty even on all the campuses, in fact. And then when it came to those 2 that were in the second tier, the co-working space and social spaces, those are spaces that really came through a lot of our conversations as spaces that students need. These are spaces where they can sit and work effectively, or socialize with their friends, or work in groups, and in some cases take online courses from campus. So there were a lot of students who really were looking for that place where they can kind of focus and do their work and or relax in between classes. And both of those were needed. When it came to the kind of specialized classrooms and experimental technology spaces, I think a lot of students, especially those who are in some of the newer buildings where we had the posters, felt like they already had access to spaces like that on campus, so it fell a little bit lower. But we saw more of those in places where there are fewer new science buildings on campus. So another thing we did during our time engaging with students was release a student survey. This student survey was really looking at a broad range of information, but 2 things that we wanted to pull out were students' approaches to taking online courses, as well as how they socialize on campus. So on the top pie chart, you can see that almost 70% of students take their online courses from home, which makes sense. But we really wanted to dig into the other 32% and get a sense of where they were going on campus. And you can see that a few things sort of percolate to the top. The library is a fairly good choice. Obviously, it's designed for such things. But you can see 14% listed a specific campus location that was not common to other respondents. So there's a large group of people on campuses who are really finding little niches and nooks on campus in order to do their online courses from someplace where they have a sense of security, a good connection to Wi-Fi, hopefully acoustical isolation, and a good hard surface to work on. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as we think about the plan moving forward. Then when it comes to socializing, almost 45% of students don't socialize on campus. About half of those don't socialize at all. They kind of come, do their thing, head home. The other half, they tend to socialize with their friends off campus. But for the other 55%, we wanted to look at where they were doing their socialization. And again, there were some things that kind of percolated to the top. Cafeteria made a lot of sense. Everyone gathers around food and coffee and those sort of things. So that was a popular choice. Student centers are really designed to house socialization. So that was an obvious choice. But we did get a lot of responses for both the library and outside. And I think, that is something that became apparent, is that outdoor space is someplace that students crave, seek out, and utilize when they have it. All right, so we also held, as I mentioned, a series of community engagements, and we asked for some input and responses from community members. Community members, as you can see from some of these responses, some of them were faculty or students who joined the conversation. Others were business leaders who were interested in being engaged, and some were neighbors who participated. We did get a lot of responses about how people engage with the campus through events, whether those are social events or cultural events, performances, those sort of things. And another one that came to the surface quite a bit was swim teams. So many swim teams like to use the facilities on campus, and that has become quite an attraction for the community. So when we talked about what's kind of changed over time and what they would like, or what kind of things are impacting them in the community and around the campuses, there were a lot of responses. Some of them are a little bit predictable. Traffic, traffic is worse than it used to be. There's a lot more activity going on. There was a lot of comments about increased population and changes in the population. There was a lot of comments about immigrants coming into the county and needing access to education, and perhaps in a different way than previous. But there were a lot of, I think, positive responses with regard to the changes as well. So from all of that information, we kind of looked through 6 lenses at what are some of the things that are going to drive this master plan. And, I've mentioned a few of them, but there are some that maybe I haven't talked about yet. For instance, there's some growth. There are growth in certain areas that we need to be conscious of, which includes the applied and health sciences. Both of those areas seem to be have a voracious appetite for space and courses. I did mention the need to expand informal learning environments and how the libraries are kind of being transformed to do that. But those spaces are really critical to the success of the students. So we want to think about that as we go forward. As we noted, there is a need for athletic and recreation space on campus. It came through in both the mapping exercises with the faculty, as well as the student surveys, and percolated through the community comments. So definitely something to keep in mind. And then that idea of creating an intuitive campus where students have an easier time to navigate, get where they need to go, do what they need to do. And this was particularly true perhaps for some of those students who are dual enrollment or one of the programs that engages the Montgomery County Public School system. So all things that we're kind of thinking about as we delve into the plan. And from all of this information, we move forward and develop some initial concepts. So when we started these concepts, we wanted to have some overarching planning goals to guide them. And we thought about 4 key things. Student success. We want to prioritize that in everything that we're thinking about. We want to think about the existing facilities and how they can be reinvented. Those buildings that were noted with cobwebs by the faculty, or places that just didn't show up on the student surveys, need to be rethought and revitalized in some way. And then we want to make sure that as we're working, we're continually expanding access to the college for for potential students. And with all of this, we want to plan prudently about the campuses that exist and any future sites that may happen. Right now, there are a lot of constraints on the campuses. There is some capacity to grow, but we want to be thinking not just about the next 10-year period, but the 10-year period that follows that, to make sure that there are ample opportunities for the continued evolution of the campuses as we look forward past the 10-year mark. So with all of that, we wanted to think about each of the campuses individually. And for Rockville, we really wanted to focus on that pedestrian core. Now that there is a little bit of breathing room, we wanted to make sure that we were enhancing that and moving forward with a plan that created a really robust pedestrian network that allowed for those outdoor spaces that students were seeking to be apparent and active and engaging. And we wanted to think about arrival and frontage of this campus. It is a little bit off the main drag, and we got some good responses about where people felt like they arrived on campus, but they tended to be fairly internal to the campus. So people didn't really feel like they had arrived until they really got onto campus. So how can we make that arrival process a little better? And then we need to think about how to develop more on this campus, because at the moment, its footprint is fairly well complete. Right now, it's about 1/3 parking, 1/3 buildings and grounds, and 1/3 natural habitat and athletic fields. So just thinking about what future uses might be and where they might go. So looking at the actual plans, this is where we started in 2013. So the campus as it was then, you can see that density of buildings in the core of campus, that lack of green space, and quite a lot of the land is really used by parking. So since then, there's been some real improvements on campus. The north garage was constructed, which freed up a little bit of real estate to do other work, including the student services building, which has been constructed, as well as replacing the baseball field with a soccer field and concessions building. And there was a renovation to Science West. Also, this is the area where the demolition occurred to open up the center of campus and really create that green space in the middle. So looking forward, we have a couple of tracks that we're looking at here, and there are different things that we want to accomplish. In this first option, we really look at reinforcing that core of campus. We're considering the demolition of one of those smaller buildings that is currently not highly occupied because the occupants have really moved into a new building, and really opening up the green space so that it connects better to Macklin Tower, which is where the library will be renovated in the near future and will really become a hub of student activity again. So you can see these little blue ticks around all of the existing buildings. And the idea is that we want to do some interventions in those buildings that open up the facades a little bit, engage the landscape better, and create some of that space that students are looking for. Some flexible space, some of those second tier spaces where students can study or socialize or engage with one another. And we also want to look at the opportunity to create a new media arts building that will help improve those facilities on campus, as well as enhance the front door as people approach from the south. Also in the plan, which is already kind of in the capital planning process, is a renovation of the theater arts building. On the athletics side, we know that the track and field complex needs improvement in order to meet the needs of both athletics as well as community uses, recreational uses, and for that matter, I guess, graduation ceremonies. And we want to think about connecting those athletic fields together with a pedestrian network, which is also capable of using groundskeepers using to get around as well. And that's sort of a safety concern, making sure that everything is accessible for the athletic trainers. So in a second phase, where we're looking maybe just beyond the 10-year timeframe, we want to think about redeveloping again on the south part of campus. The idea that perhaps a new parking structure could be built that could allow for that future development down the road, as well as kind of creating an opportunity to build an early college center where parents can bring their school-age children who are taking classes on campus and can have a concise drop-off that's very convenient. They can do that handoff and feel safe about it. Also included in this is renovation of the PE building. So we know that there's a lot of need there and definitely want to think about that in the plan. So then looking out even just a little bit further, building that garage would allow for the redevelopment of the south part of campus, creating an opportunity to build additional academic buildings, create a quadrangle that connects the performing arts building with some of the media arts building and other art facilities, and really kind of expand that facility for the needs that are associated with the performing arts. So that's kind of the academic core. And then we also want to think about the potential of providing housing on campus. So we've identified a couple of locations, some on campus, some potentially off campus, where housing could be developed to help support student needs. All right, so option 2 takes a slightly different approach, but still some of the same principles. So in this phase, we're really looking at the opportunity to expand the student wellness on campus by really recreating the physical education building, perhaps leaving the pool in place because that's easily separable from the rest of the building and it's an expensive thing to build, but really creating a more robust and holistic wellness building on campus that contains more than just physical education space, but also includes classrooms, counseling, anything else that might be associated with a holistic approach to wellness. Again, we want to think about improving the track facilities to meet athletic and community needs, and also to create that safe path that connects all of the athletic facilities together. Additionally, we still know that the library renovations are ongoing, as well as the planned renovations at theater arts. And we want to do something to invest in the student food service and so forth offered in the CC building. So then in a next phase, again, sort of looking at that south part of campus, is there an opportunity here to create a new media arts building that helps collect some of the art facilities from the smaller, less efficient facilities, as well as that same idea about a parking structure and early college center for the high school students. But then also the demolition of the PE building would allow for a quad up near the campus center and the new wellness building that could be focused, kind of an outdoor space focused on student wellness and well-being. So that could be implemented in this sort of second phase horizon. We also want to look at connecting some of the smaller buildings on campus and making them a little more efficient and effective for modern academic needs. So that's something we're looking at kind of on the edge of the quad between the CS and the HU buildings. And then in a third phase, looking a little bit further in the future, again, that focus on the arts and kind of expanding the performing arts facility, which is in need, as well as demolishing some of those smaller buildings to create a space for, again, the arts to kind of be connected around a quad. So really creating an arts precinct on campus. And again, we still want to acknowledge the potential need for student housing, and if that is something that we want to do, finding a location for that. One thing I should mention in all of these plans is that the college is working right now to help define an approach to adding additional forested areas to campus, which could help meet some of the City of Rockville requirements and expand the potential for development on campus by relocating some of the designated forested areas from the center of campus to the perimeter of campus and increasing the overall campus forested areas. And you can see that in this sort of light green hatch. So with that, I'll turn it over to Poppy to help us walk through the Q&A.
Hey, Mike, thanks very much. How's my audio? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Perfect. So I'll just introduce myself just very quickly. My name's Poppy Humphrey, Director of Standards and Accountability at Link Strategic Partners, and I'm just jumping in for a few minutes for Mike Lakin. So Mike, thanks very much. That was really, really interesting presentation. So I know that we have a small but select group with us here tonight, but we'd really like to hear thoughts around, what really excites you most about the potential improvements on the campus. So Mike, how would you like to do this? Would you like to use some software polling or open it up for discussion, or just have thoughts in the chat?
I think we can use the chat or just come off mute and say hello.
Okay, sounds good. So what are our thoughts, folks? Anything that excites you most about the potential improvements on campus based on the information that Mike shared with us, or anything new that comes to mind? Feel free to drop any thoughts in the chat. And we should also say that there's the website as well. So if anything comes to you after the meeting, then you can reach out to us anytime and give us your feedback or ideas or thoughts, and we'll make sure that that's fed back to the team here.
One thing that is interesting to me, I know it's in phase 3 for both of the two options that you discussed, but is the potential for housing. I think, as everyone knows, housing in the county and in the region, we need more of it, especially housing that's accessible and affordable to students. Particularly intrigued about the potential of housing off campus that could support the activities on campus. I know that's down the line quite a way, but that's something that I think the city and the region could benefit from.
Katie, thank you very much. That's actually very topical because we're dialing in from an International Town and Gown Association, and off-campus housing provision has been a key topic discussed here. So Mike or Kerry from Montgomery College, I'm going to hand over to you for any thoughts on that. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, Katie, it's a great point. And I think as soon as we started thinking about student accessibility to campus and really providing pathways for students to expand their future horizons through education, some of those concerns about the lack of affordable housing became apparent. And so the conversations kind of wound to, how can we provide an opportunity for students? And we're just sort of at the beginning of thinking about this, but there's a lot of different ways that it can happen, whether it's on campus or it's off campus, and how is it connected to other services that help the students kind of have a holistic experience?
Hey, Mike, thanks very much for that. Kerry, is there anything from your perspective that you'd like to add to that? If not, then we'll move on to the next question. That was a great question.
Yeah, I think Mike summed it up. It's just at the beginning of looking at that, and I know it's an interesting thought, and we'll see how that could maybe evolve.
Thanks, Kerry. And Kerry, I know that you were dashing over from another meeting to join us. Would you mind just giving us a quick overview of your role, please?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Norberg. I'm the Planning and Design Director. I'm the point of contact for this project between all our faculty and staff and students and the community to our consultants, Canon Design and to Link.
Thanks very much, Kerry. And Mike, are we okay to move on to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. So the next question, any feedback on how you'd see your engagement with the college growing as this plan becomes implemented? So Katie, you knocked it out of the park with your first question. If you've got any thoughts around this, then we would love to hear them. Thank you.
Oh, I was waiting to see if anyone else wanted to talk. But going into this, I guess I should say I work for the city of Rockville. I'm the head of their comprehensive planning team. And we are right now working on an update to our town center master plan, which does not actually touch the campus boundaries. It stops just south of Manatee Street. So it comes up pretty close. So, you know, I would love always to see increased engagement between, you know, the city as a staff and the college, but also our residents and the college, and really find ways to foster connections, whether those are physical or kind of metaphorical connections between the students, faculty, and staff on campus to our Rockville Town Center. Like many other town centers, you know, the past 3 years have been really, really tough. We're seeing an exodus of largely employers who are going remote, or we had a lot of county folks leave and go to Wheaton when a new building opened up. So we're always looking for ways that we can activate our town center and really support it. And I think having, you know, Montgomery College so close is just such a natural anchor in our area that we really haven't capitalized on the proximity we have to one another quite like we could or should.
Hey, Katie, thank you very much. That's a really good point. You know, engagement between the college and the community has always been integral, but the changes and the impact over the past 3 years, as you said, is it's become even more important. Mike, I'm going to bring you in for your thoughts on that, and then Kerry, I'm going to jump over to you.
Yeah, so you know, anytime there's planning going on in an adjacent precinct close to a campus, and you know, when it's a town center, and in this case a community college, which is really focused on the pipeline between education and employment, there's a myriad of ways where the alignment of goals of one plan can match the alignment of goals in the other plan. So, you know, I think as that town center plan evolves, it would be great to understand what those overarching goals are and what some of the strategies are, and see how they can be aligned with the goals that we've articulated for this plan, and how the you know, the physical and or metaphorical, as you put it, connections can be made between the two efforts.
Mike, thanks very much. Kerry, I'm going to bring you in now, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Mike has stated, that Montgomery College is definitely interested in how we can, you know, partner with not only the city of Rockville, but, you know, other aspects within the community that would bring in services or provide services for our students. So definitely would like to talk more with you, Katie.
Thank you very much. Katie, if we could take your contact details, then we can make sure that we're staying in contact with you, and that goes for everybody here tonight. But thank you, Katie. Mike, can we move on to the next question, please? Okay, so, you know, I suppose moving on from the previous point that was made, what partners in the community might be interested in working with the college on this plan? We've spoken about student engagement and community engagement. Community is very, very broad. So are there any other partners that we think that we could tap into as we move forward with the plan? Any ideas, folks? Ideas in the chat, or feel free to come off mute.
Well, it sounds like the city of Rockville planning department would be one.
There you go.
We're here. We're ready.
That sounds great, Katie. Thank you very much. Katie, have you got any other thoughts around that?
Not off the top of my head. I can certainly give it some thought, but absolutely city. And, you know, we have a lot of county partners too. I'm sure there's already established relationships there, since, you know, the college is kind of a part of the county. There's got to be others, just nothing that comes to the top of my mind.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Katie. And Mike, just out of interest, when you've been having discussions, what types of partners have been thrown up in these questions when you've been speaking with other campus communities?
Well, it's a wide variety of things. Sometimes it's a community association that's focused on a particular topic, whether it's nature, the environment, tree cover, those sort of things. Cycling organizations that are kind of interested in that, those aspects. Obviously, the business community has shown some interest in partnership, and particularly at the Germantown campus, where there's the opportunity to use the Innovation Center to kind of focus that energy. But there's a lot of kind of conversation around where connectivity between industry and academy can kind of further both, if you will. So those are kind of two big aspects of, I think, the interest. But there's also been some sort of tangential conversations about how the mass of students and the adjoining neighborhoods can help reinforce economic development in the immediate vicinity of the campuses. Right now, there's a lot of kind of come and go, but if there's a little bit more sticky space around the perimeter, is there that opportunity to kind of help things flourish a little more than they are? And that, is even more relevant the more the communities are connected.
Sure. Thank you very much. Kerry.
Well, we've had discussions internally about some of the other organizations that would help promote the whole well-being of our students. It could be bringing in some healthcare type partners, because the college isn't in the business of providing healthcare, but there's plenty of county organizations that we could tap into. So we've talked about just the whole student wellness.
Thanks, Kerry. And that's something, in terms of the sharp increase in students and staff and all members of communities requiring support in the past 3 years, and the impact, that's something that we've seen grow exponentially. Okay, thank you very much.
I should mention that, in some of those conversations, there's been a lot of talk about connecting with nonprofits and county resources that might want touchdown space to help broadcast and or deliver services to students on campus.
Thanks, Mike. Interesting. We moved on to the next slide, please.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. So as Michael said at the beginning, and I echoed, we would love to hear from you anytime. So if you've got any thoughts at all, please visit the Montgomery College Facilities Master Plan website. We've got a snazzy QR code there, and you can give us feedback, thoughts, questions. There's also details of upcoming events that are posted on there, as well as a breakdown of some frequently asked questions as well. But we would be delighted to hear from you. The door is always open. So please feel free to get in touch. And just want to say thank you very much, Mike, Kerry, and Christina. Thank you for representing us tonight. And thank you very much for those of you that have attended and shared part of your evening with us. And I think if there's no other comments or questions, Kerry, I see you've come off mute.
No, just to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Do the same. Thank you so much.
Mhm.